2024 has been an absolutely packed year for video games, and if you're anything like me, between the likes of Tekken 8 and Final Fantasy and Dragon's Dogma and everything else, you might have seen a few titles slip through the cracks. And yeah, I know your backlog is absolutely massive, but you don't want to end the year not having checked out the following games. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 most overlooked video games of 2024 so far. Number 10, Open Roads. Look, I'm still in denial, like you probably are, that we are well into the 2000s being the focal point of the nostalgia cycle. But I shouldn't be surprised that we're starting to see video games mine this period for interesting characters and emotional dynamics. Open Roads is the latest naughty set drama, a story-driven adventure game about a mother and daughter grieving the loss of the family's complicated matriarch. Between a mix of first-person exploration and charming visual novel-esque cutscenes, Open Roads is a short but incredibly emotional game. With stellar performances from Caitlin Dever, who is currently set to play the live-action version of Abby in The Last of Us Season 2, by the way, and Kerry Russell, it may not live up to the quality of the developer's previous work, including the seminal Gone Home, but it is a worthy addition to their oeuvre. Especially if you own Game Pass, it's definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of story-driven games. Number 9. Pacific Drive. Pacific Drive is unlike any other game released so far this year. Sure, you can look at its disparate parts and see that it's made up of survival elements here and horror elements there, with a slathering of roguelike glue holding everything together, but much like the cars that you'll be building in the game itself, the overall result is much more than the sum of its parts. Set in The Zone, a section of the Pacific Northwest that's been sealed off from the rest of the country due to the unexplainable phenomena and extreme weather that dominates the area, your goal is to drive into the dangerous wilds and fill up your car with loot to bring back to home base. With each run, you'll find bits and bobs that'll allow you to upgrade your car, eventually crafting stronger components that'll withstand runs into deeper, more dangerous areas, in the hopes of uncovering the mystery at the heart of what the hell happened to this part of the country. Although there's no combat to speak of, Pacific Drive is just as intense as any shooter on the market. The risk-reward gameplay sees you spending longer in the zone in the hopes of grabbing better loot, but the longer you're out there, the more banged up your car's gonna get, and you might end up losing everything that you grabbed along the way. This is a game where spending time creating the most durable vehicle and packing just the right amount of equipment for the mission is as thrilling as actually being in the thick of it. Number 8. Rise of the Ronin. For a while, it didn't seem as though Rise of the Ronin was destined to be overlooked or undervalued. The latest open-world Souls-like from Team Ninja received a huge marketing push from Sony and launched as one of the first major PS5 releases this year. However, enthusiasm for the game died down in the run-up to launch thanks to some lukewarm reviews and trailers that had people deriding the exclusive for looking like a PS3 game. Their words, not mine. And sure, it's not a 10 out of 10 smash by any means, and its graphics can't hold a candle to the most lavish of first-party blockbusters, but Rise of the Ronin is still a thoroughly recommendable game. Essentially a mix between Elden Ring and Ghost of Tsushima, Team Ninja's latest is the devs' most ambitious game yet, an 80-hour epic overflowing with dungeons to explore, side missions to take on, and enemy bounties to cash in. Though its open world is structured like most in the genre, dotted with activities broken up by progressing the main story, it's all kept fresh by the outstanding combat system at the game's core. This is the most immediate a Team Ninja game has felt since Ninja Gaiden, taking a leaf out of Star Wars Jedi Survivor's playbook by splitting the difference between Souls-style challenge and DMC-style power fantasy. The devs get the balance just right, crafting a tough but fair gameplay loop that's both varied and rewarding enough to sustain the lengthy runtime. The story is maybe a little bit too ambitious for its own good, but this is mechanically anyway one of the best games you can play this year. Number 7. Cannibal Abduction. Oh look, it's a Josh list and he's banging on again about Puppet Combo. Come on man, change the frickin' record. I know you're all probably saying that, but hey, what can I say? When Puppet Combo stop making and publishing great games on the regular, I'll stop talking about them. Under the torture Star label, the publisher has brought a bunch of amazing horror experiences to console recently, including early release Cannibal Abduction. Now this is a short but sweet third-person survival horror game about a guy, you, trapped in a house with a murderous cannibal. Presented with PS1/early PS2 style retro graphics, you're tasked with exploring the killer's abode while solving puzzles and keeping away from the end of the maniac's knife. This is a shorter experience, admittedly, made to be mostly played in a single sitting in lieu of whacking on a horror film, but that's to the game's benefit. It's charming, rough around the edges, but filled with enough gory delights to leave a great lasting impression. And even better, this is bundled as well with The Night of the Scissors, an even shorter but just as impactful title that works with the same basic gameplay principles. As a package, they're well worth the price for anyone who misses the glory days of non-blockbuster survival horror games like Obscure. If you played that, what can I say? You're a real one. Number 6. Crow Country. There have been a bunch of great horror throwback games flying under the radar across the past few years. Hell, I just talked to you about 2 in the last entry. Signalis, though, was easily one of the best, molded in the classic survival horror style of the PS1 years. And 2024 saw the release of the similarly designed Crow Country, with character models looking like the polygonal, blocky nightmares found in something like Final Fantasy VII, and low-res environments funneling you into the path of locked doors and theme park monstrosities. There is more going on under the hood here than a simple nostalgia play. The general framing has you investigating a mysterious theme park hiding a sinister secret, with each of the themed wings and attractions transforming from cuddly entertainment for the kids into sinister enemies out for your blood. It's a premise that could have felt a little bit one-note or overly quirky admittedly, but Crow Country finds the balance between camp and horror, approaching the subject matter with enough self-awareness without sacrificing a genuinely spooky atmosphere. There are a few nice twists on the expected mechanics as well. The ability to move the camera with the right stick awards the player's curiosity and frees them from the confines of a truly static camera. Manual aiming and damage values award the combat with surprising depth, while the puzzles similarly add extra wrinkles to the classic key searching formula. All told, it's a must-play for horror fanatics. Number 5, Still Wakes the Deep. Look, I didn't expect to have 3 horror games in a row on here, but that's just sometimes how it shakes out. Still Wakes the Deep is a nightmarish cross between The Thing and Cold Fear, with a little bit of Soma thrown in for good measure. A first-person horror title from the Chinese Room, this 1970s set period piece casts you as Kaz, an electrician stationed on a rickety oil rig. Between running from his demons back on the mainland to dealing with union-busting bosses and out-and-out proud racists in his own team, the character's life gets a whole lot worse when the rig's drill hits something unexpected in the sea. Though we've seen plenty of story-driven, first-person horror games with light stealth mechanics like Still Wakes the Deep in the past, few have been presented with as much confidence or polish. From the stunning photorealistic graphical style to the small, authentic details housed in the rig itself, the Chinese Room's latest is a masterclass in atmosphere and world-building. Though there is plenty of gore and body horror thrills, this is a mature horror game for more than just the blood and guts. Kaz's personal tale provides a grounded, dramatic tether that metaphorically reflects the more conventional horror of the most bombastic set pieces in a way best left unspoiled, but trust me, is ripe for interpretation. It's definitely closer to a walking simulator than a true stealth game, but if you enjoyed the likes of Amnesia: The Dark Descent and the aforementioned Soma, you'll be right at home here. Number 4, Indica. Hellblade 2 was a little bit of a disappointment, wasn't it? Well, fortunately for us, it wasn't the only third-person narrative-driven action game that we received in the first half of 2024. And hell, even if Hellblade 2 was a smash, Indica would have still given it a run for its money. A wholly original adventure title about a nun named Indica who was sent to deliver a letter across a dangerous and surreal alternate history take on Russia, this is a game impossible to sum up in just a few hundred words. It's utterly unpredictable at every step, in one moment offering deep meditations on faith and religion, and the next taking a turn into fable-style fairy tale logic where slapstick and dark humor reign supreme. Though you can boil the game down to walking, platforming, and solving physics puzzles, Indica has such an authorial stamp that it presents these tried and tested mechanics mechanics in interesting ways. From making praying itself part of the gameplay to changing entire genres to present you with pixel art powered 2D sequences, this is an experience that tries everything it can think of and mostly nails the execution. Number 3, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Ubisoft has needed a win for a decade now. After spending most of the last generation pumping out generic sequels to their biggest franchises and attempting to launch botched live service games, the troubled company has made some positive moves over the last few months. Though mostly sticking to the in-house AAA formula, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora was much better than most expected, while this year's Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown was a bona fide smash. Returning the franchise to its side-scrolling origins, the latest installment is a stunningly tight 2.5D Metroidvania action game. With impressive level design and surprisingly satisfying and visually spectacular combat, The Lost Crown came out of nowhere to become one of 2024's first Game of the Year contenders. Hopefully, the company learns from this critical success and learns a valuable lesson. Not every revival of a beloved franchise has to be a live service cash grab. Number 2, System Shock. System Shock is one of the most respected sci-fi gaming franchises of all time, but when most people talk about, they're usually discussing the more popular sequel. As such, the original iteration, with its simpler Metroidvania structure and lower emphasis on RPG systems, falls by the wayside. Thankfully, a recent faithful remake finally hit consoles in 2024 after a PC launch last year, gloriously updating the original 90s PC cyberpunk aesthetic into a mix of old meets new retro textures and tile sets. The devs have tried to create an updated version of the game that looks like your brain remembers it, rather than radically overhaul what was there with a new style. In practice, that makes for striking visuals, with the fine details of the space station you're shooting your way through brought to life with care and attention. Gameplay-wise, it's your classic Metroidvania structure. You move from one level to the next across an interconnected space station, roam the labyrinthine corridors, and mentally note down locked doors that you'll be returning to later. It's an engrossing loop for sure, one made more satisfying to engage with thanks to responsive controls and a drip feed of intriguing environmental storytelling. That story itself might not feel all that groundbreaking all these decades later, but it still makes for a tense, scary sci-fi shooter trip. Number 1, Nobody Wants to Die. Nobody Wants to Die is a tragically undermarketed cyberpunk detective game that throws you into a world where, as the title teases, society has progressed to the point where the wealthier folks can literally buy their way to a life of immortality. And truthfully, I kind of feel like I could just end the entry there, what with that premise alone being so tantalizing. But Nobody Wants to Die backs up its interesting on-paper ideas with a lush, fully realized sci-fi world. If Cyberpunk's Night City was merged with BioShock's Rapture, developers' critical hit games commits to its retro-futurist framing, encouraging players to mix old-fashioned detective work with science fiction gadgets and abilities. Manipulating time to find clues and piece together crime scenes, the gameplay might not be the deepest, but it has enough flair to maintain interest for the title's shorter duration. And it's all in service of a rabbit hole story that cuts into the marrow of a darkly disturbing city. This thing came out of nowhere, but with inventive puzzle mechanics and a hugely memorable setting, it's sure to make an impact on anyone who gives it a chance.